I think it's most remarkable of the 166 families that have been participating in these studies over the last couple of years. That's a small number in the grand scheme of things, but it's a massive number for these brave, pioneering families that have been able to help us learn where to go next and help us learn how to accelerate this field forward.
Welcome to the first episode of the second season of the CHD podcast. I am Anna Jaworski and a heart mom to an adult with a single ventricle heart. And I have a wonderful co-host with me today.
I'm Annie Ulchak and I'm a 44-year-old CHD patient.
And today's town hall meeting deals with going from theory to reality. Specifically, we'll be talking about the amazing research being conducted by HeartWorks and their goal to eradicate congenital heart defects.
Dr. Timothy Nelson is the director of the Todd and Karen Wangnick Family Program for HLHS at Mayo Clinic. Dr. Nelson's research work is focused on cardiovascular regeneration using bioengineered stem cells to improve the ability to discover, diagnose, and ultimately treat mechanisms of regenerative diseases. As director of the program, Dr. Nelson and his team are specifically interested in the cause of HLHS and finding ways to delay and prevent heart failure for individuals with HLHS. To better understand and treat this congenital heart disease, the program has taken a multifaceted approach that includes research into stem cells, genetics, imaging tools, and the creation of a biorepository.
Brenton was born in 1990. He was diagnosed with hypoplastic left heart syndrome, or HLHS, and was airlifted to Mercy Hospital in Des Moines, Iowa, in his first week of life. He has had several heart surgeries, including a pulmonary artery banding, a hemifontan, and a completion fontan. He has had many stents put in, a pacemaker, and 2 ICDs. In 2018, Brenton married his wife, Kelsey. Together, they live in Iowa, close to their families, with their pet rabbit, Big Blue. Brenton currently works part-time as a hotel desk clerk.
Jennifer Gutman is the mother of Lucas, who is also an HLHS survivor, and the sister of Jared Constein, who passed away over 30 years ago from HLHS. While in utero, Lucas was diagnosed with HLHS, and when he was born, his parents banked his umbilical cord blood. In December of 2015, Dr. Nelson injected the banked stem cells from Lucas's umbilical cord blood into the right side of his heart during the Glenn procedure. Consequently, Jennifer has been on the Heart to Heart with Anna podcast, talking about the HeartWorks research project Lucas was part of. Jennifer continues to be an advocate for the CHD community and is happy to come on the CHD podcast to give an update on Lucas and how his heart is doing today.
We will put links to the Heart to Heart with Anna episodes mentioned in this episode in our show notes. So let's go ahead and get started. Let's meet with our panelists. The first question for all of you is this one. Stem cell research has come a long way since we first started talking about it on the Hug Podcast Network way back in 2017. What has you most excited about stem cell research right now? And Brenton, we'll start with you.
The most exciting part, I guess, now that I'm getting older, is just the future without transplants of your heart and or liver, different treatments other than just that being the final option, hopefully someday for other patients.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I remember when my child, who was born 4 years after you, and I was doing a ton of research on the different stages of surgery for hypoplastic left heart syndrome, since my baby was also diagnosed with HLHS. And I remember asking the cardiothoracic surgeon, so is stage 4, the staged surgeries for HLHS, transplant? Is this something that everybody will have eventually? Even way back in the 1990s, he said, no, not necessarily. He said, possibly. That is something that we'll always keep in our hip pocket just in case nothing else is working. But he said, I'd like to think that not everybody will end up with a heart transplant. And I think to your point, Brenton, that this new research gives me hope that maybe not everybody will need a transplant and that we'll be able to keep people's native heart for the rest of their lives.
Right. That'd be the one thing we should look forward to as a community.
Absolutely. Jennifer, as a heart mom, what has you most excited?
Lucas participated pretty early on in the stem cell trial. He was the second child in the nation to undergo the trial, and he has flourished. It gives me hope that we won't have to do a transplant. We won't have to suffer additional sufferings, and he can just live a normal, happy life as best he can with the physiology that he has. The opportunities with stem cells are just blowing up, and we're seeing them all over the place. And it's going to be the future of congenital heart treatment.
I guess one of the things that a lot of people will be curious about, Jen, is how does this change his physiology? Does he have a bigger ventricle now? Is there ever an opportunity that maybe he'll have a four-chamber heart?
He's never going to have a four-chamber heart unless he gets a transplant. But the cardiologist said his right ventricle looks like a left ventricle. It's the best heart that she's working with at this time.
That's amazing. That's what they were able to see because I know right ventricle typically, as time goes on, they get bigger and bigger to be able to manage the workload that the left typically does.
Were all of the seeding of the stem cells on his right ventricle, or were they on both the right and the left ventricle?
It was only on his right ventricle. His left ventricle is not usable. Everything was focused on strengthening his right ventricle to be a stronger engine for him. It looks amazing.
That is so amazing. I'm so excited to hear that. What has you most excited about stem cell research right now, Dr. Nelson?
We have come a long ways. And what's really exciting is the families are participating, institutions are participating, multiple groups are involved in this now. And that really allows us to accelerate the field forward. And ultimately, we all want the same thing. We want to know what cells work the best in which patients. And many of us truly believe that there is a future state here where we can rebuild the heart, we can augment the heart function, and we can get more sustainable function out of the tissues that we're asking our surgeons to work with. So it has come a long way, and yet we have a long ways to go.
That's so true. But it's amazing to me that you've been able to do the research that you have. And in actually a relatively short period of time. We're only talking about 6 years, but look at how many studies you have done in those 6 years. I know at least two because I had two different people who are in our panel today who have taken part in your studies. Exactly how many studies have you done altogether?
Yeah, so we have had now in total 5 INDs. So INDs are the investigation on new drug applications. One of them was adults using the bone marrow derived cells that 10 people have participated in thus far. And the majority of patients have participated in our multiple studies using umbilical cord blood that was collected at birth and treated for children. And now the latest one, as we've talked previously, Anna, is the ongoing one with the bioengineered cells, where we are taking a piece of your skin and bioengineering it into your heart muscle and using that in clinical trials. That's just started and we're recruiting patients for it. I think it's most remarkable of the 166 families that have been participating in these studies over the last couple of years. That's a small number in the grand scheme of things, but it's a massive number for these brave pioneering families that have been able to help us learn where to go next and help us learn how to accelerate this field forward.
What amazes me is how you've been able to bioengineer cells so that you don't have to have stored umbilical cord blood because most of us don't think to do that. I had two babies. It never occurred to me to store the umbilical cord blood. And I think that's something that most people don't think about doing. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, it's true. Most people don't think about it, but will as we go forward more and more, right? So those studies are being analyzed right now with the cord blood, and we'll see where it leads us of how many people benefit from it and how widely we should use it. But you're exactly right. We can get the cells from bone marrow, which we have done in adult patients that have not had cord blood. And our next cell type is these bioengineered. We can literally make these from anyone, including, this is a fun fact, we've done it on a couple of patients that have been over 100 years of age. We've been able to collect and make the stem cells from their skin samples. We're quite confident that there is nobody we cannot make these cells from. And so that's really what makes this quite exciting and quite available to everybody.
I don't know if you remember, Dr. Nelson, that in 2017, I came up to the Feel the Beat event that you had at the Mayo Clinic, and I spoke with several other patients. And I remember you were talking about using someday the umbilical cord, someday bioengineered cells, and then also the adult to bone marrow. And all of these were things that were in the process and in the works, but nothing had been done at that point in terms of using CHD patients. And now what's so amazing is some of the people I had met, like Brenton, I know you had used him in your study for getting bone marrow for his congenital heart issue that he needed and being part of that. And then Lucas for the umbilical cord blood. It's just so fascinating how truly we went from theory to now fully reality. So I'll go into question 2 now. Are you able to share any information as to any ongoing clinical trials that you have going at the moment, such as those bioengineered cells?
Yeah. So the big one that we're recruiting for right now is the bioengineered cells. So it's adults 18 years and older with a single ventricle congenital heart disease and patients that have heart failure such that they're not good candidates for other advanced therapies, including heart transplant. So these are rare patients, but these are the patients that we are trying to offer a new hope for and a new clinical trial for. And so we're very actively trying to search for the right patients to be the pioneers and the first patients in this clinical trial that is top of mind for us right now. The other trials with the bone marrow and the cord blood, we're still following those patients, like the 2 families you have met today. And we are tracking their data closely and aggregating that together. And what we can tell you today is that not everybody responds perfectly to this, but we have had some patients that seem to have had a remarkable response. So we're trying to decipher, why did some respond, some didn't? How much of an impact did our cell product have on those patients? That all helps us learn how to go forward. And all of these 166 patients, whether they got the cells or they were control patients, are vital to us learning how to move forward more quickly. And as you said, Annie, it seems like it's moved fast. But then again, for families that we're dealing with on a daily basis, all of this moves so slow for them because it's not
Mhm.
making an impact fast enough. So our job is to always ask ourselves, what are we not doing today? How can we move this forward? And I'll tell you, what you guys do on this podcast and sharing and communicating is a major contributor to being able to inspire other scientists, other physicians, and patients to be part of this, because it takes all of us together. None of us can do it alone. We're proud of our track record, but we're also eager to try to do it faster and get more people involved.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with it does seem like it's fast, but when you're going through or you have a family member who's going through this, you want it right now. And right now can be years from now. I won't deny, even for myself, I don't want to be at that level that's going to need to be a participant in this. But at the same time, I'm still at a level where my heart has slowly been damaged through heart failure and other issues with valve and stuff. So it's like I sit there and I go on your website from time to time hoping and looking to see if maybe the advancement has become enough that you don't have to be in a category where transplant's not an option, but you're also well enough to be able to do a few things too. Jennifer, for you, question number 2. How is Lucas doing now?
He's doing fabulously. His cardiologist is just overwhelmed how wonderful he's doing. We're just so blessed to have been a part of this study because she's completely blown away with how strong his heart is, the ejection fraction, everything is going wonderful. Unfortunately, he will have to have a surgery for his paralyzed vocal cords this year, but we are looking at a great improvement in quality of life and a happier Lucas. So we remain thankful.
That's wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. And then regarding surgery, has he had his on-hand procedure yet?
Yes, he had that in 2018, recovered well, and life has been pretty stable and good ever since. So obviously, there's always complications at surgery, but he was able to overcome them and he's living a very healthy, happy life at this point.
Wow, that is amazing. Did they say when they did his on-hand any kind of modifications in it, considering that he had the stem cell?
No, they did not. Everything was pretty straightforward. His airway has been the tricky part at this point, but the
Mhm.
stem cells have done fabulously by him.
Thank you.
Jen, do you know, did he have an intracardiac Fontan or an extracardiac Fontan?
I want to say extracardiac Fontan,
Okay.
but
That's what I would hope since it was
yeah,
2018, but I wasn't 100% sure. Yeah, the nice thing about that extracardiac Fontan is what we're hoping with these newer Fontans is that it will reduce the potential for scar tissue developing on the heart because they won't have been cut on as much because that extracardiac Fontan gives an external conduit. And I know that the arrhythmias that can develop because of the scar tissue are one of the later complications that can happen. So, not having as much cutting on the heart hopefully means less scar tissue and that therefore less arrhythmias. So, it all sounds good. It sounds like they've really optimized his physiology to give him the best chance for a normal life.
we've been lucky to have an extremely wonderful team around Lucas, and we've always sought the absolute best care possible for him and going the extra mile whenever we need to. And I think we're seeing all the benefits of that.
Brenton, tell us how you're doing now and whether or not you've had to have more stem cell therapy.
I'm doing really well. Day to day, if you met me, you wouldn't know I'd had a heart condition. I have not had to have any more stem cell therapy or anything like that. I was just part of that trial in 2018. They didn't, they told me it turned out really well for me. But as far as everybody else, I don't know. And they haven't really mentioned any more future stem cell studies with me directly, anyways.
It's amazing to me all the different procedures they have done trying to utilize these stem cells from the stored cord blood that Jen had to actually using bone marrow from Brenton. It's so rudimentary, but there is great hope that these people who have nothing else as an option will at least have this and hopefully they'll see good results like Lucas and Brenton have. And Brenton, what place does stem cell research hold for you in the future?
Um, Probably the same as it did then in 2018. If they give me the option to do it, I'd like to know more about it, and I probably would go through with whatever it is they were wanting, barring what it all involves. Yeah.
So it has such good results for you. It's not something you would shy away from.
I think when they first called me to do it, I didn't think too hard on it. I was going to do it. I had to convince my family more so than me, just because I always think someone had to be the first to do all the procedures. We've been through, I don't know, I'm at the age that why not continue for the younger kids?
I love that. You have that
Awesome.
pioneering spirit.
Yeah.
Jennifer, what about you? What place do you feel stem cell research holds for Lucas in the future?
I can certainly say that Dr. Nelson and his team have well earned our trust and support, and we can't wait to see what else they're going to come up with. And we're excited that there's options for the future. If his heart starts to decline, he has options. He can try more stem cells. He's going to be able to have so many more options than what we're given. For instance, with my brother, with him passing away, there just wasn't much success back then. And just to see the field explode with all these new opportunities for patients just thrills us and makes us so excited. It's it's nice to have hope that things are not staying stagnant. They're expanding, they're growing, they're learning every single day. And there's just such a brighter future for my son.
Oh, I love that. That was so well stated. Wow. Yeah. And it's so heartbreaking to me that your brother did die from a heart defect. How has this affected your parents to not only see having a son be born with a heart defect, but then to see their grandchild born with a heart defect?
That's a really tough question. It was probably the worst day of my life when I told them that my son was going to be born with the same defect that killed their son. And actually, I wasn't planned for. My parents wanted 4 children. My late brother was number 4. Unfortunately, he passed away. So they decided to have me. And it's just very ironic that my son also has HLHS. So it's been hard, but they have been our biggest supporters by far. They're there for every surgery. They're there for whatever we need at any time. But emotionally, obviously, it's pretty difficult to, it's difficult for them, but they're the strongest people that I've ever met.
Oh, that's so wonderful. I feel like for them, it's almost like they're getting a second chance at seeing this come out with a happy ending instead of the ending that they suffered.
I agree with you. Nothing's ever going to replace their son and my brother, but this is a second chance for our family to conquer HLHS. And that's why we fight so hard. We look for the research trials. Fight to make sure that he has the best care possible.
I
So
love that.
beautiful.
I know. Isn't that beautiful? Gosh, I've got tears in my throat.
And now I
Okay.
do too.
So the last question that we have for you, Dr. Nelson, is what place does stem cell research hold for you in your future?
My future is my current. This is my career. This is what I do. And I've committed my work and my energy to this. This is a field that doesn't happen overnight. And it's a journey that we will be on for a while. But if we do it, I believe we will be able to create new solutions and new options for virtually everybody with congenital heart disease. And the one thing to remind our audience and the people that are in the congenital heart world that you all have been the inspiration and the reason why cardiac advanced therapies have affected the tens of millions of people worldwide. And what I mean by that is, why didn't we ever develop the heart lung machine in the first place? It was to be able to fix a VSD and a hole in a child's heart is why that technology was even invented. Why did we have a catheterization, echocardiograms to look at congenital malformations and decide who needed open heart surgery, catheter procedures, all of these inventions that we take for granted in cardiovascular medicine has been pioneered out of the field of congenital heart disease. And we view regenerative medicine as being the same pathfinder for all of cardiovascular medicine. And that's why we're so grateful for this community and this community's commitment to innovation. We have a long track record, and I'm proud to be on the team and part of the team that's trying to continue on that journey.
It's because of you we have hope again.
I appreciate that, Annie. And we all have a lot of hope, and we should be hopeful right now. There's some amazing families, and there's definitely some amazing team members that are well aligned. And there's never been a more hopeful time for our community. There's no doubt about it.
No, I think that's definitely true. I know that all of this started to try and help people with single ventricle hearts, specifically hypoplastic left heart syndrome. But do you see a day in the near future where you'll be able to apply these same techniques to people with other kinds of congenital heart disease?
Yeah. Why did we start with HLHS? It's simply the fact that's the area that has the greatest need, right? A single ventricle in the right anatomical position is the congenital malformation that has the biggest challenges and the biggest unmet needs. And that's why we started there. But this is the same technology that even the plastic right heart and other forms of single ventricle congenital heart disease are likely going to benefit from this learning. So our current technology with our bioengineered cells is intentionally offering it to single ventricle patients, not just HLHS patients. So I do think that you'll see this field evolve and begin applying the technology as soon as we can, as safe as we can, to more and more patients. And congenital heart disease, there are simple conditions, ASDs, VSDs, that we can repair and have a durable, lifelong curative approach. That's the goal for all patients with congenital heart disease, to have solutions that can meet that demand.
So now I want you to look into your crystal ball. And I wonder, do you foresee a day where if a woman finds out in utero that her baby will be born with a congenital heart defect, that they'll be able to do something in utero so the baby can be born with a fully functional heart?
I think there's no doubt that we'll get there. 10 years ago, we went on ABC Nightline with Bill Weir, and we made his cardiac tissue from his skin. We showed people under the microscope and we said, there's a day where we'll be offering this to patients in clinical trials. And here we are 10 years later doing exactly that. With this community, with this team of innovators, if we can envision it today, it's highly likely that we can do it. And what you're offering is the idea that is not far fetched, to do in utero procedures and to be able to augment and rebuild tissues before babies are even born, or even shortly after they're born, with the goal of ultimately having a biventricular circulatory system. There'll be some borderline patients where this will be readily available sooner. And obviously, the more severe defect of ventricular formation may be a lot more difficult to do. But we will, I think, evolve as a field where the safety of this technology will prove such that deploying it in utero could have even a bigger bang for the buck than doing it in adults. I think we have to consider all of those possibilities. I truly believe that the earlier we can intervene with a cell-based regenerative strategy, the better. The body's ability to accommodate that healing regenerative process is no higher than at birth or as a fetus anytime in our life. So why not maximize that? I don't think that vision is far-fetched.
And what I like about the possibility of us doing that is that it would hopefully quill any opportunities for other organs to be damaged in the reckoning, because that's the thing with so many of these really complex congenital heart defects, is that there's almost this trickle down effect where other organs are damaged. And I think the Fontan associated liver disease is a really good example of that, but that's not the only one. There's plastic bronchitis, there's protein losing enteropathy, arrhythmias. It seems like there are so many other problems that can develop after you have a complex congenital heart defect that I would love to see us eradicate, which is the word you like to use in We Build Hearts. Let's eradicate congenital heart disease. And then hopefully that would mean we'd also get rid of so many of these other complications.
Anna, you make me ponder on a couple of things here. I think there's three junctions that I think about as a physician scientist. One is when we diagnose a family with hypoplastic left heart syndrome. That word comes out of our mouth. You never take it back, and it changes that family's life forever. There's another time point that changes people's life, and that's Fontan associated liver disease. And sometimes families are in their teenage years before they even hear that word, right? And then a third obvious one is the point where we get and we say transplant. And these are three big moments that nobody ever forgets if they're forced to go through this. And the reality is, when we have these conversations, how we have these conversations, it's usually in a chronic problem. We're facing a bad crisis situation is more often than not when these words come up. And we got to change that paradigm. We got to change the paradigm from a sick care model to a health care model, a curative model, so that we can even use genetics to predict who's at risk and start intervening so that we can change the trajectory of the course of these diseases and change the trajectory so dramatically that we essentially effectively cure the disease. And that's what the modern science and new knowledge allows us to do, is think about this in a completely different way. If we just let everybody misbehave, have bad diets, drink a lot of alcohol, do all of the nasty things to our bodies that we know are toxic, and then expect our healthcare systems to come in and magically fix the problem, we're missing a huge opportunity. When we can get people to think healthy, preventative lifestyles, and we can intervene as soon as we possibly can, Now we have a realistic chance at changing the arc of the trajectory of these moments that we all fear.
Wow. That is a lot for us to ponder.
I want to thank the panelists for sharing, and when we come back, it'll be time for the town hall audience to ask questions or share their experiences with us.
The CHC Congenital Heart Conversations podcast is a presentation of Hearts Unite the Globe, or HUG, and is part of the HUG Podcast Network. HUG is a nonprofit organization devoted to providing resources to the congenital heart defect community to enrich the lives of our community members. For free CHD resources, please visit our website at congenitalheartdefects.com.
You are listening to the CHC podcast. If you have a question or comment that you would like addressed on our show, please send an email to Anna Jaworski at anna@thechcpodcast.com. That's anna@thechcpodcast.com. Now, back to the CHC podcast.
Welcome back. We're talking about stem cell research and our effort to move from theory to reality at today's town hall meeting. And now our audience is able to share their experiences or ask questions of our panelists.
Hi, Frank. Thank you again for joining us. Frank Jaworski is the husband of Anna Jaworski and the father of a heart warrior who was born with a single ventricle. Frank, what did you think about this show so far?
I think the show is fascinating, and I love listening to people who are actually involved in or will benefit directly from the therapies that we're talking about. It's fascinating that I talked to Tim Nelson, the lead researcher. When I talked to him in August, I found it amazing how far along they had come. And I think the difference is that a lot of the research that's done on this is done on animal models and laboratory models and things. Whereas a lot of the research that I've read about historically for treating heart defects occurs in the operating room. They actually take a human being and try out something they've tried on animals before. So you talk to people who have been through these things personally. This is happening behind the scenes, and I think it's going to explode on the general public when it comes out. And it's fascinating to watch it happen.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more on that. It is quite fascinating, especially since what you had said when the surgeons would go in, open the heart and be like, oh, okay, so this is what it looks like, and this is how we're going to do this spontan. It may be classic, but they may have had some modification due to the fact of what was larger, what was smaller, what was missing, et cetera, et cetera. Because I know for me, when my surgeon went in with my HLHS, he immediately could see and was able to move things and shift things so that everything worked in a better way. And even the fontan itself, as it's classic, still had its own intricacies so that it could be modified for the best outcome for me. So very true on that.
I think it's interesting how in the last decade, we've seen several different methodologies come about. So now it's not uncommon to hear doctors talk about creating 3D models of the heart and actually practicing their surgical technique on this 3D model instead of having to do what they did with you, Annie, which is just go in and have faith that they're going to be able to do it on the child. Way back when, they really went in blind. They didn't know
Yeah,
exactly
completely
what they were going to
100%
see
blind.
because they didn't have the wonderful diagnostic measures like the MRI. When you were a baby, they didn't have
Yeah.
MRI for you guys and the
No, they
CAT
had,
scans.
exactly. They had x-rays and a little bit of echoey kind of thing. But even then it was very grainy. It was like you go in and surprise, here we go. Hope for the best.
Oh, and to
Yeah.
see where the imaging diagnostic measures that they have today are so much better than what they had before. But now to take it a step further and say, you know what, it's not enough for us to work with what we have. And even if they're creating all these amazing materials that they can use for stents and for valves, it really is quite miraculous, all of the different
Yeah.
methods that they have used to try and prolong life. But now for Heartworks to say, we build hearts, we want to make this heart as good as it can possibly be and minimize all of these other techniques and procedures that may need to occur with heart warriors.
Yeah. Yep. I agree.
Absolutely. You talk about minimizing procedures. Back in the 90s, I worked in the adult cardiac ICU, and everybody that came in had a sternotomy from surgery, except for the few that were cath lab patients, but everybody had a midline sternotomy. And I've been saying for years that one of these days, our grandchildren are going to look at history books and say, why did you saw their chests open? And the answer is that's the only method we had at the time. So, yeah, the new techniques are truly amazing.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
absolutely love that. That's so great, Frank. I agree with you. It's amazing. Frank, you do work in the medical field. For those who are listening who haven't heard Frank talk before, he is an advanced nurse practitioner. He's actually a certified registered nurse anesthetist. And you've seen medicine change a lot since you started way back in the 1990s. And since you're a heart dad as well, let's face it, you and I are really passionately aware of what's going on because we know that this could affect our own child. But I'm going to ask you to look into your crystal ball and tell me where do you think, based on what you have learned and based on the fact that you're a huge science fiction lover, where do you think science will take us? Do you think that there's something even better on the horizon for us as far as our heart warrior surgeries?
Oh, it depends really on how far in the future you're talking about. Plus, just because I'm interested in science fiction hasn't addressed medical care the way that it has a lot of other things. It tends to do physics, astronomy, engineering, that kind of stuff. But the things that I can see as possibilities in the future be more sophisticated imaging, which we talked about already, more sophisticated diagnostic tools that could do measurement of things we can't even see or touch right now without going into the chest, and the ability to make predictions as to where you have to when you go in. One of the things that has changed dramatically in medical care in the last 50 years is that whole body autopsies are done much less frequently than they used to be. And the reason is that in the past, when a person died with or without surgery, they would do an autopsy to find out inside them what happened. Because of the imaging we have now, people know what happened. They've been able to follow the progress of the processes while the person was still alive. So when they died, it wasn't a mystery. Things like that
Wow.
will become more and more common as we go along. There are possibilities that are blue sky distant science fiction, things like little micro machines the size of cells that would be like robotic phages you could put inside of a person's body. They could do things like make connections, connect vessels. They could clean plaques out of vessels. They could make bridges for electrical impulses, all these kinds of things.
Is that kind of like the nanotechnology that we studied about when our
It,
kids were in robotics?
yes, but nanotechnology covers a great deal of ground. This is a very specific kind with micro machines like that. And we're talking 100 years from now, probably.
Mhm.
But it's out there, and there are people that are thinking about it already.
Wouldn't it be awesome if we had little micro machines like you're talking about that could go in and take care of those collateral vessels that so many of our heart warriors end up having?
Yeah,
And then
Oh,
they
I
wouldn't have to have
know.
it.
yeah,
Or like an ablation instead of having to really do more damage to the heart in so many different places because they can't exactly find it 100%. They're able to then really just locate it, get that one little blip in without damaging other surrounding tissue and hope that they're getting it all.
yeah, yeah.
Oh, that would be so
Exactly.
That's
amazing. And
amazing.
that sounds like what Frank was talking about with the even more precise imaging,
Yeah.
diagnostic
Mhm.
imaging, because I think right now there's so much that they can't see. Isn't that true, Frank?
Oh, absolutely. And what they can see is so much better than it was 20 years ago. We have
Yeah.
three suites for electrophysiology in the hospital that I work at, and one of them just got remodeled. It took most of the year to get the remodeling done with new equipment, new software, new imaging systems, that kind of thing. This upcoming week, the nurses who work in there will be trained in how to use that system, and it's going to provide even better care. And this happens all the time across the country. People who don't work in healthcare don't really understand the level of sophistication that we are reaching and that we plan for in the future. There's a lot of
Yeah.
interesting things
It's so
happening out
true.
there. Yeah.
I remember when those really sophisticated MRIs first came out, like really sophisticated, where they were able to bring up 3D models and actually have on the screen seeing how the blood not just went through, but from all angles and sides. I was one of the first patients over at Boston Children's Hospital who got to be the guinea pig for one of those. because I don't have a fear of being in MRIs for a very long time. And I was there for about almost 5 hours inside of an MRI. You felt like a human meanie going into a little device because the amount of stuff that they had to put on top of me. At one point, I'm thinking, I guess this is what it feels like when they crush you to death in medieval days. Because they just kept piling more and more. And they had all these different contrast IVs throughout both arms because they're going to need to do several of them with several different areas to make sure they got a whole span of it. But in the end, they asked me if I wanted to see it. And that was probably the first time I actually got to see my own imaging after it happened. Because usually a doctor might show you a little blip on a computer screen or something, say, here you go. But I couldn't help it. I just started crying, seeing my heart and thinking, holy moly, this is insane how advanced it has become that I can see every facet and how it beats and how the blood runs through it. And knowing that it's there doing its job and as hard as it's been doing was pretty fascinating. It was just quiet as we stared at it. It really was amazing. And knowing that we could go even better and further, even more phenomenal.
I love it that you were an early volunteer, and I totally believe that, Annie. I can totally see you saying, "Pick me, I'll do it."
It's like what Brenton said. It feels like us oldest CHDers, we choose and want to be pioneers, not just because we want to be pioneers, but because we know what it was like being young with all the questions, all the fears, all the thoughts, and not just for ourselves, but also for our family members. And if we can alleviate that just one little bit for the patient and the family members, and even the providers, so that life can move forward, science can move forward. And we're always here to say, sign me up, just do it. Whatever it's going to be, even if it can't help me right now, if it can help someone else not suffer the way we did, then go for it.
I love that. And it makes me wonder, Annie, if that is so empowering to know that you are on the cusp of medical technology by offering to do that, by empowering yourself to make yourself a guinea pig. I hate to use the word guinea pig, but volunteer
It's
by
true.
by
It's
making
true.
yourself
Yeah.
volunteer like that. If that doesn't give you back a sense of power, that for me, that's been one of the hardest parts of having a child with a chronic
Hmm.
illness is that you feel so powerless. But by you
Hmm.
volunteering, it actually empowers you.
Yeah,
Did you
it
feel that
does.
way too, Brenton?
You,
Did you feel that it maybe gave you back a little sense of power or control that you didn't have before?
I don't know. I guess I didn't think about it that way, but yeah. I just thought it as, like you said, furthering science, making it easier for other people in the future, and I, not so much giving me power or anything like that, but just alleviating some of the stress for future people having to go through some of this stuff.
You hear so
hmm
much about people experiencing medical trauma and given everything that you guys have been through, especially Brenton, you and Annie, you as an adult, and even Ayrton having acquired
hmm
heart disease, having that long QT syndrome, and having had a brother who passed from an undiagnosed CHD, there's a lot of medical trauma that goes on. And I think there's a certain amount of medical trauma that goes on being a parent of a child. And Jennifer, I'm sure you and Frank can either refute me or back me up on that. But I do like to think that those of us who say, yes, we'll do what we can. I love your altruistic bent, Brenton, you and Annie, that yes, go ahead, use me. Let me help. Let me see what we can do to make it better for future generations of people who are born with heart defects. I love that because I really do feel that maybe that can help reduce that sense of medical trauma that we experience. I'd love it if you all would tell me how you feel about that.
I'd be happy to talk about this. Actually, I conducted a research study for my master's degree about the mental health of CHD parents, and it's bad. It's really bad. We're not okay. We're terrified. There's huge amounts of PTSD, anxiety, depression, feelings of isolation. The results were staggering, and it just brought me to my knees that I'm not alone. But anything we can do to further research studies and improve care for HLHS and CHD in general, we're all there for it. We know that our grandchildren will very possibly have CHD because my brother had it, my son has it. The likelihood is pretty great. So anything we can do to participate to improve outcomes long term, we want to be a part of.
I love it. And I love that you did that research, Jen. That's amazing.
Yeah, that is fascinating. And I'm not surprised at the outcome of the research because for myself, working in healthcare, working in the adult intensive care unit, seeing a lot of patients that were post-op, I thought I was ready. But when I saw my own child in the ICU with drain tubes and IVs and central lines and monitoring wires, like most things in my life, what really happens to me is I think I'm ready, then it catches me off guard, and it's hard.
Jen, what is your master's in?
It's actually in criminal behavior. So my research project had nothing to do with my degree, but my professor really encouraged me to follow my heart, ask questions that I want to find the answers to. So that was the biggest
Wow.
question I wanted to conquer and figure out if it's just me.
Wow.
It's funny that you say
Wow.
criminal behavior, Janet, because I wonder if you could do a more of a longitudinal study and see if people who have been through this, these parents, do have problems with criminal behavior later on. I know that a lot of people in the military who experience PTSD got into very hazardous behaviors and did illegal things after their wartime experiences. And I think that the trauma that it causes in you, no matter what kind of PTSD it is, can bring you to that point.
I think that'd be a really interesting topic to research. I wonder how levels of divorce rates, alcohol and drug abuse, how that all factors in.
I feel like we have a makings of a book.
Yeah, but at least another show for sure, because we actually did talk about addiction on this podcast in season 1, and it
Yeah.
is an issue. It is definitely an issue. And I wouldn't be surprised if the root cause of it isn't the trauma that people go through, both the parents and the survivors. It is
Yeah,
really tough.
it is something
Yeah.
that does come up quite a lot, especially in psychology as well. The trauma does lead to risky behavior, criminal behaviors. It's something that I did come across quite a lot when I was doing my psychology degree.
Wow.
Yeah, I completely believe it. So, Frank, would you like to ask any questions of Brenton or Jennifer?
No, the discussion has been pretty far-ranging and fascinating. There's no specific questions I can think of right now. This is the kind of thing where I'd have to stew on it for a little while and then come back. Everybody has their own perspective. You were talking about the fact that when surgeons would look into somebody's chest, they would see what's actually going on and make on-the-spot decisions on how to do it. Just because surgery is like that, people forget that the individual experience is also like that every one of us comes from a different background and has different factors that affect us and that deal with how we handle things. So everybody has their own story.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And something that I always say to other CHD patients when they ask questions or say, this is my experience, to let them understand that what I just went through, they may not even be near that experience, or they may have pieces from it. And what will happen to them won't be exactly the same thing that happened to me. I couldn't agree more. Yeah.
Anna Jaworski has written several books to empower the congenital heart defect or CHD community. These books can be found at Amazon.com or at her website, www.babyheartspress.com. Her bestseller is The Heart of a Mother, an anthology of stories written by women for women in the CHD community. Anna's other books, My Brother Needs an Operation, The Heart of a Father, and Hypoplastic Left Heart Syndrome, a handbook for parents, will help you understand that you are not alone. Visit babyheartspress.com to find out more.
This content is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. The opinions expressed in the podcast are not those of Hearts Unite the Globe, but of the hosts and guests, and are intended to spark discussion about issues pertaining to congenital heart disease or bereavement.
Welcome back. Now it's time for our co-producers, Eric and Beatty, and Spencer Teaton, to talk about this episode with Anna and me. Eric is a bereaved sibling and long QT syndrome warrior.
And Spencer Keaton is actually a Texan who is a volunteer with Hearts Unite the Globe. And this is the first time that Spencer will be helping with the CHC podcast. So thanks for being a producer today, Spencer. And let's hear from our people who are behind the scenes. So, Ayrton, what did you think about the show today?
I found it really interesting learning about how stem cells have helped move heart surgery forward. Because obviously, I'm still learning all about different procedures and therapies because I don't know a lot about this stuff still. So,
Yeah.
helping out with this podcast is just a huge education for me.
And I'm so glad that you were able to share some of your experience in segment 2. So I agree. I feel like this podcast, Heart to Heart with Anna, even Marie, but still me, I'm always learning something new with the podcast because there's so much to know. I'm really curious how you felt about it, Spencer, because you have your own physical disability. Can you tell us a little bit about that and maybe how you feel about stem cell research possibly helping you in the future?
Yes, I actually never thought about it helping me. I have cerebral palsy, so I guess I never thought about it. But as far as congenital heart defects go, my whole family on both sides have heart troubles. My dad passed away last year from a heart attack and had heart failure. He passed away from the same condition as my grandma, who was 80 like 2 years before, which is what brought me to actually volunteering for you for the first time, was because I've had so many people pass away from heart failure. So I wanted to learn more about it. So I love every single episode that you do because I learn more every single time.
First of all, thank you for helping with the podcast like you have, Spencer. It means a lot to me to work with you. And I'm sorry to hear that you're coming because you've had personal tragedy with heart disease. That makes me really sad to hear that. But also, learning about stem cell research gives me hope for you, sweetie, that maybe some of this research will spill over into the cerebral palsy realm. Do you think that's a possibility? Have your doctors talked to you about that?
Really, once you're an adult with cerebral palsy, they don't really do anything for you besides tell you to go to a neurologist. Before that, I actually went to Shriners and it was really great. I would have surgery and Botox, but now I can still get Botox. But they would put me to sleep versus now they keep you awake to put 10 to 12 injections into your legs, which is really painful.
It's really painful, but is it helpful? I've never heard of putting Botox in the legs. I know it helps my
Oh,
friends who have migraines.
oh yeah. No, it's really helpful. It's something that they've been doing since I was 5 and I'm 30 now.
Oh,
So,
wow. So does it actually maybe relax the muscle so you have less spasticity?
yes, but only for a few months and then you have to redo it.
Wow. I had no idea about that. So you're teaching me something new, Spence.
Me too. But I have no idea. They mostly focus on children with my disability. I don't know if they're making any kind of new ways for the children, but as far as adults, no.
This may be something you want to talk to your neurologist about.
Oh, yeah. I guess I could. I see her next week, actually.
Perfect timing.
Co-producers, Brenton, I'm going to ask you first. What surprised you the most? What surprised me the most would probably just have to be with how far and how much advancement that they've made in the work of stem cells and maybe one day not needing a heart transplant because you could grow your own. I think that is probably the coolest thing ever for our
I
future.
know, I have
You
to
know,
agree with you. Yeah, definitely. Erican, how about you? What surprised you the most?
I'm going to have to agree with Spencer. The possibility one day being able to grow another heart or stem cells, so a heart transplant is no longer needed. And it's also ironic we're talking about this
on the anniversary of the first human heart transplant.
I know. I love it that she posted that in our group, Ayrton. So, for those of you who don't know, we pre record our programs, and it's actually December 3rd, 2023, when we're doing this recording, and it is the anniversary, which, yes, I think that really is interesting, Ayrton. Thank you for sharing that fact in our group.
Yeah, it's a website that I use every day to put my history degree, and it's like random facts for on this day. And it's also coming up for the 80th anniversary for the first successful operation for blue baby syndrome as well.
I
If I remember
know.
correctly. Oh my goodness.
Yes, it is. So, that is amazing. And that, for those of you who aren't scholars of congenital heart defect research, Dr. Helen Taussig worked with Dr. Alfred Blaylock and his assistant, Vivian Thomas, and they created what was known as the Blaylock-Taussig shunt, and now it's called the Blaylock-Taussig-Thomas shunt or the Blaylock-Thomas-Taussig shunt. It doesn't really matter what order you put it in, but those were the three people responsible for coming up with the procedure used to save babies who were born with tetralogy of Fallot. And that was really the first procedure that saw major success in having children survive infancy when they might otherwise have perished. And that was way back in the 1940s. So it is so exciting to see that in 2024, they will be celebrating the 80th year of having had that procedure available to save people's lives. And people like Annie and Frank's and my child and Brenton and Lucas, all the people that are here today, they would not be alive today probably without that amazing creation by these three people, because Dr. Norwood actually used a modified Blaylock-Taussig shunt in the first staged procedure for those with hypoplastic left heart syndrome. So, yeah, it's pretty miraculous to see how far we've come in under a century, to where people who were born with these conditions didn't even survive. There was no hope for survival, to the point now where we're talking to adults who have even more serious conditions than tetralogy of Fallot. So, yeah, it really is amazing.
And you have to remember, Anna, that the BTT shunt was also given to single ventricles before Norwood even created what he made,
You're,
the Norwood
you're
procedure.
absolutely
And
right.
so,
Yeah. Yeah. You're
yeah, because that's what
absolutely
I
right.
had. I had the
Yeah.
BTT shunt to keep me alive until they felt ready for my Fontan, which wasn't until I was 7.5. And that was because my own body told me I was ready.
Yeah. I met Brian Rothlein in Florida when I was speaking at a conference years ago, and he was the oldest person I had met with hypoplastic left heart syndrome because, like you, he was operated on with just a BTT shunt until he was in his early to middle childhood, when he finally was a candidate for the Fontan as well, because it was before Dr. Norwood came up with his procedure. So, yeah, it's pretty amazing how that shunt was used even before Dr. Norwood modified it in the eponymous procedure that everybody knows now, the Norwood
Hmm.
procedure, because it's named after him. But they say that people stand on the shoulders of giants, and Dr. Norwood certainly stood on the shoulders of the three amazing people that we mentioned earlier. So we have one more question, then we're going to have to end this show, but I would love to know the biggest takeaway that you had for this show today, Ayrton. Can you tell me what your biggest takeaway was?
I think it's just amazing how far the science has come in the last 80 years.
Absolutely. And Spencer, what was the biggest takeaway for you, sweetie?
I would say my biggest takeaway would be that every CHD patient is like a family, a close knit community, because it seems like each one of y'all want what's best, not only for your family, but for future generations, and won't stop until y'all find a cure for everyone. And I just think that's so beautiful.
Oh, I do too. I'm so glad you said that, because as somebody from the outside looking in, That's heartwarming to me that you see how close all of us are with one another. I just love that. Don't you, Annie?
I do. I really do. And it's very true, too, because one way or another, we are all connected, whether it be through surgery, trauma, patient stay, providers. We are all connected.
Absolutely.
I want to thank you for joining us today on the CHD podcast. We'll hope you'll join us next month for our February episode, and we'll be talking about growing up with a CHD. Until then, I'm Annie Ulchak.
And I'm Anna Jaworski. Have a great day and keep those congenital heart conversations going on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you for joining us. The CHC podcast can be heard monthly wherever you get your podcasts. Visit us on Facebook or Instagram to continue the conversations. Join the Hearts Unite the Globe Patreon group and become part of our town hall meetings. It's simple. Just visit www.heartsunitetheglobe.org and select the tab that says Donate to Hug with Patreon. Then you too can be part of the conversation.